Let's continue to learn this topic, implicit differentiation. Implicit differentiation in Mandarin 就是用普通话来说是隐微分法。隐微分法，隐形人的隐，隐藏的隐，大隐隐于市的隐啊。Implicit means not explicit, implicit. What is the concept of implicit? Okay. Though this is a graph or a curve, which is the solution set of this equation. And this graph is not a graph of a function, but locally, for example, at 3, locally, if we consider this portion locally, at some open interval containing the number 3, this part is a function of x. Also, if we consider this portion, and this is also a curve of some function. In this case, we can write down these two functions explicitly. For example, here, we consider y equals the square root of 25 minus x squared. Of course, we may consider x between minus 5 and 5. Here, we may consider a function. We call this f, lowercase f. Now here we consider a quarter of this circle. This is y equals square root minus okay, open interval. So, for the point 3, 4, the portion, in fact, this upper semicircle, which is a graph of some function. And also, nearby this point 3 minus 4, if we consider the quarter of this circle here, from 0 to 5, only this arc. This is also a function of x and passing through this point. And these two functions satisfies this equation. For example, that function, x squared plus y squared, if y equals the square root of 25 minus therefore, we have x squared plus this function equals 25. When x between minus 5 and 5. Also, if we let y be minus square root of 25 minus x squared, Then this time we have x squared plus g of x squared. We have a minus sign here, but the square of a minus sign is positive again. Therefore, x squared plus g of x squared equals 25. 2. Here maybe we consider x between 0 and 5. There are many possibilities. For example, we choose h, x be this part together with this part is also a function, satisfies this equation. There are many possibilities. Or we even just consider some small neighborhood of the number 3. We don't need to consider the from minus 5 to 5 or from 0 to 5. There are many possibilities because the aim, the objective here is to find the slope. So we don't need to consider a very long curve. We just consider a small portion on this curve is enough. So, if a function, of course, this y is, we find the y by solving this equation. If we don't find y explicitly in terms of x, we just keep this in mind. When we have a function of x and y, two unknowns, once x is given, we may fix some y. For example, here, consider y is positive. Once x is given, then there will be a corresponding 1y. So ideally, we have this idea, or ideally, we may treat y as a function for x when how to say this? When xy is when given some point on this curve, nearby this point, in some neighborhood of this point, we may regard y as a function of x. We don't need to solve the explicit form. For example, right now here or here. This is the explicit form of the function f. This is an explicit form because we already expressed y in terms of x. But here, this relation, if we ignore this one, we say a function lowercase f is defined by this equation implicitly. Though we don't write down the explicit form, but according to that equation, for any given point on this curve, we may regard this variable y as a dependent variable, as an independent variable. So here we have a definition about the implicit defined. Where is this? Okay, never mind. I mean, is said to be defined implicitly by some function if f of x and f equals 0. Okay. For example, if f of xy equals this function of two variables, then f of xy equals 0 will be a curve on or in the plane. So minus 25. Okay, this is an equation of two unknowns, x and y. Okay, this is an equation of two unknowns, x and y, because we have equality here. An expression with an equality is called an equation. And here we have two unknowns. Okay, once x is given, for example 3, then there is only one unknown y. We can solve this y in terms of 3, in fact 4 or minus 4. So locally we can treat y as a function of x. Okay. Any function satisfies x squared plus or satisfy this relation. Any function satisfy this equation equivalently in this example, satisfy this equation is called a function defined by this equation. The function is called defined implicitly by this equation if we let y be f of x. When x is given, then this automatically a given because f is a function of x. And suppose this equality holds, then we say this function is defined by this equation implicitly. 好，用这个 in Mandarin 用普通话用中文来说的话，就是一个函数呢，这个是对这个方程式不是很明显的定义这个间接的定义，明显的定义就代表说这个方程这个函数满足把 y 的这个代数会是这个等号成立一个例如说，这是一个方程式。当 x 给定之后，就可以解除 y，x 给就可以解除 y， 可以把 y 当成 x 的函数。是什么样子呢？不用写出来。任何一个函数只要满足这个关系，就叫做由这个方程式不明显的定义出来的函数。因为我并没有真的要把它详细的规则写下来不用真的解出来，就叫做不明显的定义，不是很明显的把它定义出来。但是 的确我们把它认为定义的一个函数。Okay, so implicit means we don't need to write down an explicit form. We don't need to write down an explicit form. Just keep in mind, yes, when x is given, we can solve y. X is given, we can solve y, just treat and y as a function of x. This idea, this notion, this concept is called the function is defined implicitly by this equation. Well, now in this example, if we find the slope, use explicit form. Then we have 就是我们如果现在用一般的把它解出来，用这种已经明显写出这个规则的方式来算它的斜率。If we solve this problem to find the slope here, use the ordinary method, and that is if we already express y in terms of x, we express the lowercase f as explicitly. Then, in order to